The information provided in this podcast is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. Listening to this podcast does not create an attorney-client relationship with Foyle Legal. For advice tailored to your situation, please consult a qualified legal professional. Welcome to Personal Injury Claims Explained by Foyle Legal, your trusted source for understanding personal injury claims in Western Australia. Each week, we simplify complex legal issues, from motor vehicle accidents to workplace injuries, so you can confidently navigate your rights and claim the compensation you deserve.
Ever been stuck in that stop-and-go traffic? You know, when you're inching forward and bracing for brake lights, and bam, suddenly you're checking out someone's bumper sticker collection, a little too close for comfort.
Yeah, I've been there. Happens more often than you'd think.
It really does, and it always seems to happen at the worst possible time.
Maybe.
But anyway, today we are diving into rear-end collisions, specifically here in Western Australia.
The old fender bender. Always a fun one to unpack.
All right. And we've got these excerpts from a guide published by Foyle Legal, a personal injury law firm here in Perth, to help us navigate this. So we're going to try to get to the bottom of what the law actually says about these situations.
Sounds good. Because it's not always as simple as it seems, right?
Exactly. There's this big assumption that if you hit someone from behind, you're automatically in the wrong, no matter what.
Yeah, I can see why people would think that.
I'll admit, I kind of always thought that was the law.
It's a common misconception. The Foyle Legal Guide actually addresses this directly. While rear-ending someone often points to fault, there are actually a ton of exceptions.
Really?
Oh, yeah. The law actually looks at each case individually on its own merits.
So it's not as simple as you hit, you're guilty.
No, not at all.
So in what kind of situation might the driver in front actually be held responsible, or at least partially responsible?
Okay, so picture this. Someone cuts you off in traffic, forcing you to slam on your brakes. The car behind you can't stop in time, and boom, you've got yourself a rear-end collision.
Oof. Yeah, I can see where this is going.
Even though you got hit from behind, the person who cut you off could actually be the one who's held responsible.
Wow. Because they created the dangerous situation.
Exactly.
So it's not enough to just look at the point of impact, but also what happened leading up to it.
You got it. And that, my friend, is where contributory negligence comes into play.
Okay, contributory negligence. That sounds a little intimidating.
It's not as complicated as it sounds.
Well, break it down for us. What does it actually mean for someone who's involved in a rear-end collision?
Basically, it means you're not off the hook if your actions contributed to the accident, even if you were the one who got rear-ended.
Interesting. So even if someone hits you from behind, you could still share some of the blame.
Exactly.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Let's say you're driving and you slam on your brakes for no good reason. Maybe you were distracted by something on your phone, and the person behind you crashes into you. Even though they hit you, your actions slamming on the brakes for no reason could be considered negligent.
That makes sense. So you're saying even if you get rear-ended, you're not automatically in the clear.
You got it.
So what are some other examples, according to this guide, where the driver in front might be partially or even fully at fault?
Well, there are lots. Like suddenly braking without a good reason or not using your turn signals, which, let's be honest, we've all been guilty of that at some point.
It's true.
And of course, driving erratically or too fast for the conditions. All of these things could shift some of the blame back to the lead driver.
It's a good reminder that we all share the responsibility of driving safely, no matter where we are in the line of cars.
Absolutely. Being predictable on the road is so important. You got to give other drivers a fair chance to react to what you're doing.
For sure. Now, we've been talking a lot about who's at fault, but let's shift gears a bit and talk about injuries, because rear-end collisions can be about a lot more than just dented bumpers, right?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, that's a really important part of this whole discussion. And it's something that a lot of people don't think about until it's too late.
What do you mean?
Well, this guide really stresses the importance of seeking medical attention right after a rear-end collision, even if you think you're fine. Well, this guide really stresses the importance of seeking medical attention right after a rear-end collision, even if you think you're fine.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, adrenaline can mask pain, right?
Exactly. You could have an injury and not even realize it in the heat of the moment. Plus, some injuries, like whiplash, might not even show up right away.
It's better to be safe than sorry, especially with the guide mentioning these common injuries from these accidents, ranging from whiplash to, like, way more serious spinal injuries.
Oh, for sure. And actually, early treatment can make a huge difference in your recovery, especially with the more serious stuff.
Right, right. So you're not just protecting your health, but also kind of starting a record of your injuries, right?
Yeah,
Which I'm guessing would be really important if you need to file an insurance claim or, even pursue legal action.
you nailed it. And speaking of legal action, let's get into that claims process in Western Australia after a rear end collision. Because honestly, it can feel pretty overwhelming.
Oh, for sure. Like, where do you even begin? What are the crucial steps if you're injured in one of these collisions?
Well, the guide actually lays out the process step by step. And first things first, you have to report the accident.
Okay. So, like, call the police.
Yep. You need to contact the police and your insurance company.
And this is important to do even if you think the other driver is totally at fault.
Absolutely. It's crucial to have an official record of what went down no matter what.
Okay, so that makes sense. What comes after that? Do you have to talk to a lawyer, like, right away?
Well, that's where getting in touch with a personal injury lawyer, like the ones at Foyle Legal, can be a huge help.
Okay.
They can walk you through your rights, help you gather all the evidence you need, and just guide you through the entire claims process.
Oh, so it's like having someone to translate all that legal stuff into plain English?
Exactly. And one thing that's really helpful is that they often work on a no-win, no-fee basis. Have you heard of that before?
Yeah, I have. I'm not sure everyone listening has, though. Can you explain how that works?
Yeah. So basically, you don't have to pay any legal fees up front. You only pay if your case is successful.
Oh, that's good to know.
It definitely makes getting legal representation way more accessible, which is a huge deal for a lot of people.
Totally. It can get really expensive really fast.
Oh, yeah. And the guide actually mentioned that the whole process, like from start to finish, can take anywhere from 6 months to 3 years to settle.
Wow, 3 years. That is a long time to wait.
Yeah, it can be a long road. And that's another reason why having an experienced lawyer on your side is so valuable. They can handle those lengthy processes and make sure you're protected every step of the way.
Right, because you don't want to be doing all of that on your own.
Exactly.
Okay, so before we move on, let's recap what we've talked about so far. We've debunked that myth that the rear driver is automatically at fault. We've talked about how contributory negligence can sometimes shift some of the blame back to the driver in front, and we've really emphasized how crucial it is to seek medical attention after a collision, even if you feel okay.
Yep. And on top of that, we talked about the ins and outs of the claims process, the role of lawyers, and those no-win, no-fee arrangements.
All really important stuff. Now, I'm curious, what about insurance companies? How do they typically handle rear-end collisions?
That's a great question, and the Foyle Legal Guide actually touches on that a bit. So here in WA, we have what's called a fault-based system for handling motor vehicle accident claims.
Fault-based, meaning it means that who's responsible for paying for the damages, like both the vehicle repairs and any medical expenses, really depends on who is deemed at fault for the accident.
Okay, so if you're found entirely at fault, your insurance is on the hook for fixing the other person's car and covering their medical bills, right?
That's the gist of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. But what happens when both drivers share some of the blame, like we talked about with contributory negligence?
That's where things get a little trickier. Basically, the amount of compensation you might receive could actually be reduced based on how much of the blame falls on you.
So let's say, hypothetically, a court decides that you were 30% responsible for a rear-end collision, maybe because you were tailgating a bit, even though the person in front of you slammed on their brakes out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
Would that mean you could lose out on 30% of the compensation you might have received otherwise?
You're basically describing exactly how it works. The court would look at who's responsible, assign those percentages, and then adjust any compensation accordingly.
Wow. Okay, so those percentages really do matter.
They can, yeah. And it's just one of the many reasons why having a lawyer on your side can be so beneficial in these situations.
Right, because they can kind of fight to minimize your liability, right?
Exactly. They're there to make sure you're being treated fairly and that you're getting what you deserve. Because let's face it, insurance companies, they're businesses. They're looking out for their bottom line.
For sure. It's good to have someone in your corner who knows how to navigate all of that.
Exactly. Someone who knows the ropes and can really go toe-to-toe with the insurance adjusters. So, speaking of figuring out who's at fault, what kind of evidence is typically used to make those determinations? It can't just be a case of he said, she said, right?
No, definitely not. While witness statements from both drivers and any passengers who were present are definitely taken into consideration, other types of evidence usually carry a lot more weight.
Like what?
Well, Police reports are super important. They provide, really detailed information about the accident scene, what the officers observed, if any traffic citations were issued, all of that.
Okay, that makes sense. I imagine photos and videos from the scene are super helpful as well, right?
Oh, yeah. Especially these days.
Yeah.
With pretty much everyone having a smartphone. It's become super common for people to have photos or even videos of an accident right after it happens.
And what about dash cam footage? That can be a game changer, right?
Absolutely. It provides an unbiased, objective record of exactly what happened leading up to the accident.
Definitely worth having.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So if you have a dash cam, don't delete that footage. Keep it safe.
Exactly. It could be crucial evidence.
So we've got police reports, we've got photos and videos, dash cam footage. What else?
Oh, and of course, you can't forget about any independent witnesses who might have seen the accident. Their statements can be extremely valuable in these cases.
Right, because it's like piecing together a puzzle, right?
Yeah.
Using all these different bits of evidence to get a clear picture of what actually went down.
You got it. That's a perfect way to put it. And in some cases, they might even bring in expert witnesses, like accident reconstruction specialists, to analyze the evidence and offer their professional opinion.
Wow, it can get really technical.
It can, yeah. But that's just another example of why it is so crucial to have an experienced lawyer in your corner.
Yeah.
They have the knowledge and the expertise to handle these more complex situations and to build a strong case for you.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's say someone is found at fault or even partially at fault for a rear-end collision. What kind of consequences might they be looking at?
Well, on a practical level, if their insurance company finds them at fault, their premiums are probably going to go up.
Which makes sense. That's the insurance company's way of saying, okay, well, now you're a higher risk driver.
Exactly. But beyond the financial implications, there can be actual legal consequences as well.
Right.
Depending on, how serious the accident was and whether anyone was injured. The at-fault driver could be facing fines. They could get points on their driver's license. They could even face legal action from the other driver involved.
And in really serious cases, even jail time, right? Like if the accident resulted in severe injuries or, God forbid, a fatality.
Oh, absolutely. If someone is driving recklessly or negligently and causes a really serious accident, the legal ramifications can be really, really serious.
It's a stark reminder that our actions on the road have very real consequences, both for ourselves and for everyone else around us.
Yeah, you got that right. That's why we really can't overstate how important it is to prioritize safe and responsible driving habits every single time you get behind the wheel.
Well said. Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, I did want to circle back to something the guide mentioned about shared fault. Because we've talked about how contributory negligence can potentially reduce the amount of compensation you might receive, but are there ever situations where even if you are found partially at fault, you might still be able to recover some compensation?
That's a fantastic question.
Yeah.
And it highlights a really important aspect of the law here in Western Australia.
I'm all ears.
So even if you are found partially at fault for an accident, you might still be eligible to receive some compensation for your damages and losses.
Really?
Yeah, it's not an all or nothing situation like some people might think. Western Australia actually follows what's known as a proportionate liability system.
Proportionate liability. Okay, I think we're going to need you to break that down for us.
All right. Sure. So essentially, it means that even if you were partially to blame for the accident, you can still seek compensation from the other party, but the amount you receive will be reduced in proportion to your own share of the fault.
Okay, so it's about dividing up the responsibility fairly.
Exactly.
So let's say, hypothetically speaking, you're involved in a rear-end collision, and the court determines that you were 20% responsible for what happened, while the other driver was 80% responsible. Would you be able to recover any compensation in that scenario?
In that particular case, yes, you likely would. Even though you were partially at fault, you could potentially recover 80% of the total compensation for things like your medical expenses, lost wages, and property damage.
That's huge.
It is. And it really underscores why it's so important to talk to an experienced personal injury lawyer if you've been in any kind of accident, even if you think you might have been partially at fault.
They can really help you understand your rights and explore all of your legal options.
Exactly. They'll fight to protect your best interests and to help you get the compensation you deserve.
I think that's a perfect note to wrap things up on. It's been a fascinating deep dive into the often complex world of rear-end collisions, but I think the big takeaway here is don't jump to conclusions, seek medical attention, and if you're ever in doubt, talk to a professional.
I completely agree. It's always better to be safe than sorry.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of The Deep Dive. And remember, until next time, Stay curious and drive safely.
Thank you for listening to Personal Injury Claims Explained by Foyle Legal. We hope this episode helped clarify your rights and next steps in your injury claim. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and visit foylelegal.com for more useful information. See you next time.